Hi, it's Meg Riley here in St. Paul, Minnesota, and you're here for another hour of The VUU. It is our monthly meeting with Black Lives of UU. We're always excited to hear what they're doing and the compelling vision that they're bringing to all of us. I'd like to invite our regular hosts to introduce themselves first and then move to our guests.
Hi, I'm Joanna Fontaine Crawford. I'm in Austin, Texas.
Hi, I'm Aisha Hauser, and I'm in Seattle, Washington.
And with us today, we have Kenny Wiley, who lives in the Denver area, but currently I hear you're in Tulsa, Kenny.
I am, Meg. It's good to be here again. Yeah, so I'm in Tulsa an hour later than it usually is when I join the VUU, which is nice. But here on a really important reporting trip for UU World magazine. I'm a senior editor for them. And the story is on racism and Unitarian Universalism. And the All Souls Church here in Tulsa was founded the same year as the, I would argue, poorly named Tulsa race riots, which were more like a race massacre. And we're here exploring the links between the founding of the church and that ugly history, as well as some positives that have come from Unitarian Universalist involvement in civil rights. So as we know, it's a complicated history, and so I'm really excited to be on the VUU.
That's great. It is a complicated history, and I think in the show, we'd love to hear a little bit more about that if you're game to start talking about your story already. We also are joined by Takiyah Amin, another member of the Blue Steering Committee. And Takiyah, you're in Charlotte, North Carolina, I understand.
Yep. I've been down here in Charlotte since 2011, originally from Buffalo, New York. It's a gorgeous day today, and I'm just glad to be here with all of you.
Thank you so much for being here. Before we move into Blue, I think what's probably on all of our minds as we just try to regain any sense of normal is post-election. As Julie Taylor from the UU Trauma Ministry called it, we had a webinar yesterday for religious professionals called Post-Election Stress Response. And we're going to make that available on YouTube for anybody who'd like to watch it. We had religious professionals so that they could take it to their congregations if they want to talk about how to manage our stress right now, which is pretty pronounced for most of us. Aisha, how is it in Seattle?
So there's been a few walkouts. My son actually called me this week as part of his high school walking out and protesting. So the teenagers and the youth in the area are really calling to action. He said youth were crying. I actually was in Boston for a UUA nominating committee meeting on Sunday, which was planned a year ago. But there were teachers who told me, so I prepared the teachers, I sent them a letter, I gave them my cell phone, and one teacher especially told me that he had youth 4th and 5th grade talking about crying and not wanting to go to school. And so there's real despair, and the church staff, who's also feeling some of that despair, is trying to be the non-anxious presence, and it's a very difficult place. And Seattle, I'm in a bubble. I'm in a blue bubble, and so it's been just strange. It's like I said, living in a dystopian novel. I've been saying that through this election. I can't even watch the Hunger Games because it feels too real. So
you guys elected Pramila Jayapal out your way.
We elected Pramila, yes, and Minneapolis elected Ilhan. I mean, I'm trying, and there are 4 women of color that went to the Senate. This morning I was thinking to myself, I read an Edward Snowden quote, and he said something, and if he said it, I mean, it was a meme, so I didn't look it up, but something to the effect of, people put their faith in one man, Obama, and too much, and they're fearing too much Trump. It has to be about us. And so it felt kind of like, a call to action. This is now supporting the organizations that are going to resist. We had almost double our normal church attendance on Sunday. We had almost 300 people in the sanctuary. So we need to resist and organize. One of the things I did tell the teachers is, I said, please don't tell, and I sent a letter to parents. I said, please don't tell your children that everything will be okay, because we don't know that to be true. What I say is, know that we are part of a community that will resist and that will do all that we can to work for love and light in this world and social justice. So that was my 2 cents.
Yeah, the let's wait and see line is really just, no. I spent 15 years researching the right. I know who these people are. They're not wait and see people. We know what's going on. Anybody who's waiting and seeing, I don't know what they need to see. My own kid got hit by a truck this week. So many young people of color are getting attacked in the streets here in liberal Minneapolis and in suburbs around here. Women are getting assaulted. We're there already for the kids. They're in the front lines, and we don't need to wait and see anything. I'm not waiting for 1 minute. I'm going to resist in every way that I can and use everything that I've got for resistance. Joanna, how's Austin?
So there have been a lot of protests in Austin. Now, where we are not in the blue bubble. We are in Williamson County, which it was. At this point, I feel like it. We're trying to grasp at any little grain of hope that we can find. The voting totals showed that Williamson County did trend left quite a bit, which is good news. But out here, people are feeling very uncomfortable. And I love what you said, Meg, about the kids are on the front lines. And that was one of the biggest things that I emphasized this past Sunday is that, yeah, whereas with 9/11 and with other things, there's kind of an age difference among those of us who are white, right? Because we've never had to have the conversation with our kids about, all the different ways to act and worry and be afraid. Everyone has all ages have been put in this. The Southern Poverty Law Center has been categorizing all of the things that they hear about, including where they are happening. A whole lot are happening on university campuses, but the vast majority are happening K-12. And this thing of, we can't shield our kids from this. They are on the front lines.
And those are the reported ones. Right. Kids like mine are never going to report what happens to them. I mean, someone said, did they arrest the guy? And I was like, the police have beat you up so many times. Why on earth would you call the police for help? The kids of color are really, really the ones that my energy is most with. And so I'm really grateful for all the youth advisors and the religious educators and people on the UUA staff and people like Kenny who pay attention to the youth of color. They really need us. And usually we talk a little more before bringing in guests, but I would just like to open for Kenny and Takiyah, if there's anything you would like to add to the conversation that we're having, either from where you are or from Blue.
Well, one of the things that I think has been interesting here in Charlotte is in terms of my own work, I teach UNC Charlotte, sort of our big public university here, and we've been working already to try to get our campus declared a sanctuary campus, really trying to get our faculty and administration to go public and double down on our values and make clear that our campus is not going to be a place that yields to police militarization and intimidation of our community and people coming in and terrorizing our students. So that has been something that's made me feel really pleased and proud in the past few days. I spend a lot of time in my social media life in kind of groups online for women of color who are academics. And one of the things that's been so hard is people have been sharing their stories of things that have happened to them in the wake of this election. Too many stories of having coffee thrown at them or being chased on campus or people yelling slurs at them or racist graffiti on their campuses, and breaking to try to offer some solidarity and community to my colleagues who are dealing with their own trauma, trying to be professionals in this moment, and also the terror and sadness that we feel in terms of how do we teach after this? how do we go in and encourage our students that research and argumentation and critical thinking and thoughtfulness matters when it seems that in such a big way, our country has shown us that it doesn't? I think the biggest kind of heartbreak for many of us has just been this feeling that we are surrounded by people who hate us. At the location of our identities, whether that's because we are women and people of color and queer folks, or people who come from whatever the dominant mainstream has decided is bad or wrong, and trying to manage all that while at the same time protecting our students, and then seeing the election returns and realizing that some of the people who made this happen are perhaps also our closest colleagues and our students. So there's a real struggle in terms of how to feel safe in this moment, at the same time that there's some really good organizing happening in academic spaces.
What I would add is that is two things. One, the Denver sort of community response has been really fascinating to me because, you know, I've talked about before how I got involved in activism in response to the killing of Michael Brown in Ferguson. And, you know, I helped plan an action days after in response to Feminista Jones' call for national moment of silence. And I didn't know what I was doing. And what's fascinating is so many people at actions in Denver, and I imagine this is true elsewhere, you know, I'd never seen before. And, you know, those of us who protest regularly, you can start to see the same faces, you know, immigrant rights on Tuesday, and then Black Lives Matter on Thursday, and Saturday morning is supporting Planned Parenthood. And it's, you know, it's like your protest friends. And what blew me away in a good way, but also a challenging way, is how few people I recognized at these huge events in downtown Denver and in subsequent, you know, weekend forums. And that's really exciting. It's also challenging, you know, because it presents, if we're talking about movement building, it presents a lot of things that can be really difficult. You know, folks who maybe, you know, white, or even a Black man or man of color who just, you know, swoops in and, well, let me tell you, you know, like the way it should be. And that brings challenges. And then the other thing I would just add quickly is that, you know, the church response, which I think we can talk about more if we choose, is so crucial, because I think Unitarian Universalists especially, you know, this could be a huge moment for us, both within our walls and beyond them. But I think we have to understand who we are, and that may not line up with who we want to be. And so, you know, when I think about who is welcome in, and what people find and what people heard from the pulpit, you know, a lot of it was that I saw online was really inspiring, and a lot of it was deeply troubling. And that's what a lot of my energy is in helping this faith along into being, you know, if folks are worried about being partisan, that's one thing, but you can speak truth to power in a way that's not just like vote Democrat or else, you know, like I really believe that's possible.
Yeah, I've been mad at pretty much everybody and anything, but one thing I've really been mad about is our idolatry of the tax exempt status, and how silent our congregations were leading up to the election because of fear about the tax. No. I would give up my salary for the rest of my life to change this election. You know, there's something really, really wrong when we're not because we morally believe in an open space, but because we are worried about our tax exempt status. There's something really, really wrong with us, and I'm just mad at everybody. You know? So I made a list of like everyone I was mad at, starting with myself. I'm furious at myself. You know, I mean, there we are. Here we are. We're here. Especially those of us who are white. Just can look into so many mirrors that we don't want to look into right now. So, so I'm really grateful that you're here. You guys just met and had a planning retreat, I know, in in New Orleans. In wait a minute, what month is it? I don't know. Recently, whatever month it is, was it last month? Maybe. Do you want to say anything about Blue and kind of strategic directions and are decisions made? I know you're having a gathering in March. Like, what's up?
It was actually last month. We were in New Orleans in October, right before the Halloween weekend. And, you know, New Orleans is just such a wonderful, fabulous, great place to be. So it was great that we all had a chance to meet there. People should know that this is the first time that all 7 of us on the organizing collective team have had a chance to be all together in the same space. So this is the first time that it hadn't just been emails and phone calls and, you know, kind of organizing in digital spaces, which certainly changes the energy of things. So we definitely use some time to kind of ground ourselves spiritually and to reconnect with each other and foster those bonds and relationships, because it seems really essential to the spirit and quality of the work that we're hoping to execute. We did spend several days organizing, planning, getting clearer about our own vision going forward. And a lot of the work that we did was very much forward looking. We've submitted, I think, 3 proposals for GA. So you'll definitely have a Blue presence at GA. And a lot of the work went into thinking through logistics and details for the upcoming Blue convening March 9th to the 12th, which will be back. We knew that the convening was going to be important for Black UUs to gather as a community and talk together about the work that we want to do and see in our faith and in the world through our faith going forward. But election, it seems all the more necessary because we've been hearing from Black UUs who feel isolated in their own congregations and who are very much centered in a Unitarian Universalist identity, but definitely feel like our faith has work to do around that sense of kind of radical welcome that Kenny was talking about earlier. So the convening feels all the more important. It will have music, it will have dance, there will be workshops, there will be ritual, but there will also be some real serious caucusing and planning time to think about what it is we need going forward as a community. One of the things that has been crucial for us to reiterate is that the organizing collective, we just organize. We try to gather resources around the needs that have been articulated to us by fellow Black Unitarian Universalists. And we can't go forward in doing anything unless we gather people together and figure out what to do next. It certainly won't be us making that decisions. It'll be Black Unitarian Universalists being self-determined and moving that future forward. I should also say that during the retreat, we had a wonderful meeting with Drum. Drum was having an event elsewhere, and we were able to meet with them virtually, and we're going to definitely continue supporting each other's work and effort. So
maybe
that
for
was a
our
really great
listeners who aren't quite sure of things, can you share what Drum is?
I know Drum is Diverse Revolutionary Unitarian Universalist Multicultural Ministries. Is that right? I think so. You know, one of the challenges about being in UU spaces is we love an acronym. Good God. Came into this space, that was one of the hardest things for me, getting together with all the letters and Drum and UUA and CLF and everything. But, you know, Drum has been a powerful force for multicultural ministries in our faith for a number of years. And it seems really important going forward that people don't perceive that there's any kind of, I don't know, tension or negative energy or something between the work that Blue is doing and the work that Drum has done and also is doing. And that we definitely see ourselves as mutually respectful and supportive of each other's work, and will continue to be so going forward.
Yeah, and what I'd just add briefly to Takiyah's point is that I think a lot of times that we think about, you know, activism and social justice work, racial justice work as sort of a zero-sum game. Like if you gain something, I lose something. And, you know, what I really, and especially folks coming in, you know, who haven't organized before or marched before or anything like that, you know, we have I think we have a responsibility to help folks realize that, you know, it's okay to do work separately, right? Like it's okay for Black Lives of VUU and Drum and, you know, varying groups to do work, quote, separately, and that it's really going to benefit all of us. That sometimes we need to come together as people across racial lines, and sometimes we need to do work separately. And I just think that, you know, I think we're very clear that though, you know, Drum and Black Lives VUU are not the same and don't have the same work, that our work is heading toward, you know, it's heading toward a similar vision of what's possible on this planet.
How many people are you thinking might come to the convening in March? Do you have a sense of it at all?
Well, Takiyah looks more confident than me. Okay, you go for it then.
Just excited. You know, we're planning for, we anticipate about 200 folks coming to spend those days with us, March 9th to the 12th. And one of the things that we were sensitive to in our planning and ensuring will be taken care of going forward is that we're clear that there are families that have Black young people in them and their parents might not be Black. And so even thinking about how to ensure those people can be a part of the convening and also have accommodations for parents off-site so that there can be, you know, full participation and we can make sure that those voices are at the table. So we're thinking about 200 folks. And it's so interesting to me because as we were planning, I kept thinking to myself, ooh, I want to be there. Oh, wait, I will be. I mean, it was, you know, it's really feeling like a landmark kind of watershed moment for our faith. And I'm just really excited to have any tiny part to do with it.
So, Kenny, you want to talk a little bit more about Tulsa and the story that you're working on, which is bigger than Tulsa, as I understand it. It's you and I talked a little bit about it when I was in Missouri, and it's a pretty exciting story. And if you're looking for more information from places you don't have it, or who you're speaking with, or what's up with that?
Yeah, well, you know and I'm here with my colleague Elaine McCardle, and what I will say about it in advance, you know, is that this, you know, Unitarian Universalism, as many of us know, is a faith that at our best, we have really shown up for a variety of justice movements. And that the key word I think in there is at our best. And, you know, and so anyone, to me, if someone says Unitarian Universalism has always been a beacon of hope, or Unitarian Universalism has done nothing but hurt people, I just think neither of those statements are true. And that's what we're finding here is messiness and great intentions and a lot of passionate, wonderful people. And like everywhere else, sometimes that goes really well, and sometimes we get in our own way. And what I'll say as well is that, you know, something that going forward, you know, it won't really show up in the story so much because of the voice of journalism writing or whatever. But it's been fascinating as we've interviewed people of different races and different backgrounds, how Elaine and my identity, Elaine as, you know, a 50-something white woman and me as a Black man in my late 20s, you know, how folks may not realize it, but we may be treated differently, or, you know, in some cases, the fact that I'm a man, you know, I'm treated better. And in some cases, Elaine as a white person, you know, she's treated way better, or the person looks at her way more. I mean, it's just so fascinating to see systems alive in these interpersonal moments. And I guess the reason why I talk about that is you know, as a journalist, that's just kind of, you know, you tell the story you find. But I invite folks as we organize and mobilize and all the things that are coming and are happening now to see that systems play out in real time, and that, you know, we can't just look, I'll say it a million times between now and, you know, whenever, that if we are only looking outside of ourselves, outside of us as people, outside of our own institution, we can't make change. Because only when we're more aware of what we're bringing to a space, I think, can we start to live out the values that we preach on Sunday mornings or Wednesday nights or wherever.
Yeah, Takiyah, you were saying before we started, you were talking about this being a time for Unitarian Universalists to really deepen into our values. Do you want to say a little bit more about that and what that means and doesn't mean?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I was thinking about when I heard Kenny speaking is, you know, I grew up in a multi-faith family. I have Christian grandparents, I have Muslim parents. And one of the things that has made me feel called to this faith is not only a sense that I don't have to give up the best of what I've learned in both of those traditions, but that Unitarian Universalism really calls me to more deeply live out what it is that I believe. That this is a faith that has challenged me and has pushed me to actualize my values, right? To make my life speak louder than my lips, right? If we have the William Ellery Channing quote, if we, I've had people say, oh, well, Unitarian Universalism can't be a real religion. You know, it's not real because it doesn't call you to change. You know, it doesn't call you to be born again or to be transformed. And I disagree with that completely, because I've been transformed again and again in my identity as a Unitarian Universalist, in what I understand about trying to live a life that is congruent with my most deeply held values. Is what I say I believe showing up people in the way that I live my life, in the way that I manage my finances, in my relationships with the earth, in my professional work. This is a faith that calls me to examine that. And so in light of, you know, the election, it's interesting because I've spent a lot of time only feeling safe around Black women this week. You know, 94% of Black women came out and voted for a particular candidate that has made me feel certainly much safer in this moment. So, you know, it's been a real struggle even to be with people of faith who also identify as UU. It's like, I don't know how safe I feel around white folks right now. You know, that's real. I don't know how safe I feel around other folks in kind of progressive religious communities who might espouse particular values, but don't feel called to live them in a really visible way. This moment just makes me feel like solidarity can't be silent. That now is the time and this is the place. If you ever wondered who you'd be during the civil rights movement, or you ever wondered who you would have been during the struggle for voting rights, those struggles are right here, right now. Like, you don't have to wonder who you'd be. Now is the time to actualize and to stand up and do something. And everything you do doesn't have to be huge and demonstrative. It can be right in your own house, in your own family, on your own street, among your own neighbors. I've had so many white youths show up in my inbox on Facebook this week asking what they can do and what they can do. And my first thought has been, stop asking me. You know, what you can do is go talk to your own folks. Because the reality is, the people of color who were organizing and struggling yesterday, they're organizing and struggling today. The work that Blue has been committed to doing before the election, we're still committed to doing that work after the election. It has not changed. As a Black woman, when I look at my own history, if I look at the history of people of African descent in this country, we've always had a very kind of pragmatic approach to politics. Because in some very real ways, we've never had a candidate that necessarily spoke to all the needs of our community in any real way. And we weren't always sure that the person we voted for was going to represent us anyway. So there's a way in which this matters, but it also doesn't, in the sense that we're still called to do justice making work. We're still called to, you know, affirm the dignity of every person, not of every idea, but certainly of human life in a big, real, and robust way. So if you call yourself Unitarian Universalist, in this moment, I'm trying to see what that means in a visible, concrete, tangible way, not in an armchair, philosophical, on Walden Pond kind of way. We can do that later. But now is the time to show up and put your your butt kicking boots on. And if you're not really committed to doing those things, then maybe it's time to rethink what religious identity you really are claiming in this moment.
Amen.
Amen.
Yeah, so I really appreciate everything you said, because one of the things that I read a Zen book years ago, maybe even almost 20 years ago, called How You Do Anything is How You Do Everything. And I don't know originally where the quote came from, but it was a Zen book. And so I bring that with me, and how we are even in our congregations, how we talk to each other, how we're afraid to stand up to each other. And I say to people, this is where we can practice working for social justice. This is how we can practice having difficult conversations and standing up for our values. If we can't do it here, how are we going out and how are we going to dismantle institutional racism if we don't even know how to talk to each other about what color to paint the walls or the carpet? I mean, and it sounds stupid, but it's very much in line with, who do we give power to? Who are we deferential to? Is it the biggest donor in the congregation? How do we treat the family that can only donate $100 a year, if that? And do we dismiss their views? So how is inequality, institutional racism playing out in our congregations? And it is most definitely playing out. And unless we look at it and learn to do it differently in our places, I think it's part of living out our values. And you do get targeted. I get blamed for a lot of stuff. And I say to people, if I had that much power, my kids would do their chores. I wouldn't waste it on church politics. All I represent is having a big mouth and calling in, calling out. I've heard to use the phrase calling in instead of calling out. But saying, hey, you guys started an income inequality committee? Great. Our caretaker goes to a food bank and our minister makes 6 figures. How about we raise his salary? And I was literally told, well, that's not really what that committee is about. It's about the Seattle initiative. And I said, really? So we have the opportunity to live this out here and we're not. So to me, yeah, we this is the time, and talking to each other and moving forward, and yeah, how we do anything is how we do everything, and it's every single time. I did read something, and what I'm going to tell the children this Sunday is, it doesn't matter who our president is, we can always be kind. We can always make the decision with each other to be kind and do what's right and stand up for what's right. And it's not easy, and that's when one more thing I want to say, my neighbor over the summer, when after Trump got or that person got the nomination, it was a white man, he was totally freaking out. And I looked at him and I said, you realize that Black and brown people all over the world always feel this way with any presidential election in the United States. So it's interesting to me that now white people are freaking out, because now the uncertainty is for everyone. It is not limited to Black and brown. So thank you.
Yeah, I think the kindness is important, but also, in white liberal culture, there's often this unspoken rule of never be a PETA, pain in the ass, right? And we kind of have a phobia about that, right? And it's time to go, yeah, I'm like baseline starting point. Be willing to be a pain in the ass. Be willing to talk to Uncle Leonard, to refute what he's saying, etc.
I just have to chime in there because in several conversations I was having with friends this week, there's a lot of feeling like if people had been more willing to talk to Uncle Leonard, we might not be here now. If people had been more willing to have the uncomfortable conversation with Aunt Gertrude, who's so nice but says those things about people, that maybe we wouldn't be in this moment now. I think one of the big struggles for me, I couldn't even finish watching me at night. I'm also here in North Carolina, where we've really been trying to unseat our governor. And there's been a lot of energy around HB2 and trying to get that dismantled in our state. It's really negatively affecting our entire community. I teach on a campus that only has 3 gender neutral restrooms. I'm always concerned about my trans students. But I couldn't even watch the full. It was so painful. And when I woke up the next morning to the news, I remember thinking to myself, I have to go to the grocery store today and the post office. And I'm going to be looking at everybody wondering, was it you? Was it you? Was it you? And that might have just been my own anxiety, my own paranoia. But admittedly, it was one of the things that kept me out of church on Sunday, because just the thought of walking into a space that was predominantly white and looking at those election returns, I felt like the possibility of being surrounded by people who can smile at me and be very polite to me, and they're nice to me because in my real life I'm Dr. So-and-so from the university, but who harbor ideas about my humanity that are fundamentally damaging and, as far as I'm concerned, contrary to our espoused faith.
To our real faith.
And that's to our real faith. To our real faith. And that's terrifying to me. I mean, most things, but that scares the hell out of me, honestly, that I might be surrounded by people who are carrying their NPR tote bags and sipping their fair trade coffee and wearing the same name tag as me, who harbor ideas for me, my family, my students, and everyone I love. And that shouldn't be, you know, something that one is afraid of. Blue actually hosted some online spaces for Black UUs to gather together and just be together after the election, because a lot of people felt like they couldn't go to church. A lot of people actually felt like that was the last place that they could go and be safe, which says something about our values and how we as a faith community are or are not living them out. And it's not just about, because I've heard people say, oh, well, you know, maybe you feel less welcome in your community because you haven't been there long enough. Maybe people don't know you well enough. Maybe you'd feel more comfortable once you serve on the blah, blah, blah committee and the XYZ committee. And if people get to know you, it shouldn't have to matter. It shouldn't have to matter. I thought we were the church of the welcoming, you know, the church that was known for welcoming strangers. I thought that's who we were. I thought that, you know, we weren't a church that required you to put in a certain number of hours before your humanity was honored and recognized in a full way. I've been a member of UU churches where I've been on committees and working and paying money for years, and white folks still treat me like I'm an interloper, even if I show up in my little chalice earrings, right? There's still some assumption that I'm a visitor or that I'm a guest or that I'm somehow new to this faith, as if they've always been there. And that's the kind of stuff that we have to disrupt and find moving forward.
Yeah, I'm wondering, I hope that this is going to, in terms of Unitarian Universalism, is this going to finally going to be the thing that really gets us to have the questions about what is the core of our faith? In Christianity, I think there's constantly this war between, is the core of Christianity, no one gets to the Father, you know, but through me, or the least of these, right? That's the constant war going on there, is which of these is really the core. And I would say in Unitarian Universalism, it is, and soapbox for me, but this whole idea that the core of our religion is you can believe what you want to believe. No, you know, is this going to be where we finally say, no, it is about human worth, human dignity. This is the core of what we do. And we need to be the ones, like, this is our central religious task, is figuring out how to truly embody that, live that, and do all the work that we have to do on ourselves so that we can change the world.
I think it's important. I think what Kenny said about looking within as well as without is really key. I mean, I sent out a letter to all the CLF members because there was just some nonsense going on, and there's no time for that. And it was about, you know, if you voted for Trump and you're saying you're not racist, ask yourself what racism means. And then the next day I was driving along and I thought, if you voted for Trump, like, come on, what about the rest of us? I mean, it's so easy to say, like, those people over there, they're so racist and so bad. And I think what those of us who are white, the incredibly painful reality that we all have to come to grips with is that we're all part of what Leslie's husband Drew calls a cult of white supremacy, and that unless we are actively fighting it, a vote for Hillary, I was thinking about racist media and all of the coverage of the struggles that, when I've been there and then I've seen what the white media has covered, it's all racist media. It's different levels of racist media than white nationalist racist media. But, how do we, I'm facilitating Conversation Thursday as part of Showing Up for Racial Justice, which I'm active with. And it's about talking to people at Thanksgiving. And originally I was like, talking to your relatives who voted for Trump. Although honestly, if I had relatives that voted for Trump, I wouldn't be having Thanksgiving with them. I need to say that I couldn't. But then I thought, what Trump? Nothing. I mean, there's conversations to be had in any white family about racism from so many directions. And I think, I guess I thought where we were in those conversations, we're in a different place. That's just a lot more awful than I thought it was. But those the conversations that Unitarian Universalists have needed to have, Blue has just been so remarkable at prodding and pushing, and I'm so grateful for the gathering for people to articulate the kind of principles that Takiyah was just articulating. And Takiyah, I wanted to mention that I'm writing this book for Skinner House on it's an anthology. It's about how Unitarian Universalism saved my life. And I heard you say that. And I was like, would you write that, or else I could just transcribe what you just said? But I think, I think those voices are so important. And we at CLF hear them all the time from our 750 members in prison, that our values and our principles save all kinds of people. And if we would live them, they are so, so profound. And so may this be a time when we dare to live them without trying to please everybody, which is this sickness that we have.
Well, and we're gonna have to go deep with them. What you just said about, if you voted for Trump, what does racism look like? Okay, but and I remember us talking about this when Obama was elected. I think so many of us were going, oh my gosh, this is going to mean, this is going to be the response to any, question, asking people to question their own racism. Oh, but I voted for Obama. And also, just because you did not vote for Trump, that's not your pass. That's not your hall pass to oh, okay. That's it. You're done.
Yep. I'm definitely not giving anybody any hall passes, any cosigns, any, one of the things we'll say a lot in Black communities when we see white folks who seem to be demonstrating some common sense is that you have an invitation to the cookout. Yeah, all invitations to the cookout are hereby shut down until further notice. You have to do more particular way in order to be seen as an ally. There are no ally cookies. Nobody is going to pat you on the back or make you feel good about this work right now. That's not what it's about. Meg, when I hear you talk about the book, it sounds fascinating. If I can support or be a part of it in any way, know that you got me. And this notion of Unitarian Universalism saving people's lives, I think one of the things that I long for personally in this space is for us to think about what the salvific means in the context of our faith identity. One of the struggles that I've had in UU spaces is sometimes, we do pretty good with polity and we do pretty good with some of our social justice work, but the lack of a real persistent and consistent focus on kind of a theological grounding around what it means to be Unitarian Universalist is one of the things that I struggle with, and one of the things that I know lots of other Black UUs that I've talked to struggle with. It's like, yes, all of this is great, but what grounds informs this identity other than having a coexist bumper sticker on your car and making sure that you recycle? It's got to be bigger, deeper, and much more real than that. Thinking about what does salvation mean for Unitarian Universalists? share the good news of our faith. You know, what does it mean to be an evangelical Unitarian Universalist? If it's about sharing a gospel or a truth of some kind, what is the good news of Unitarian Universalism in this moment? And how can we live that out well beyond the walls of our congregations? I mean, one of the struggles I think in our faith community is, you know, for my friends who identify as Christian, they're Christian whether they're a member at a church or not. My friends who are Muslim, they're Muslim whether they go to the masjid or not. It is a persistent part of their identity and how they move through the world, whether they have an institutional relationship or not. And I think for very well-established historical reasons, that's one of the challenges of our faith. What does it mean to just be a Unitarian Universalist, whether you are a member at XYZ little church down the street or a CLF member or not? What about in your home? What about in your, what does it mean to be UU in the workplace? I think we do a pretty good job. One of my first kind of engagements was when I lived in Blacksburg, Virginia years ago, and I was a member of the congregation there, and I was an RE assistant. And one of the things, I don't have children, but I do value education quite a bit. And I love the way we do RE. I love the way we do religious education. Lifespan faith development, I'm here for it. Some of my favorite experiences in UU churches have been in adult RE settings, but we're not really doing such a great job across the lifespan in terms of grounding people in UU faith, theology, history, and an understanding of what that might look like in the world. My grandmother was an AME on a Sunday school when she was 85 years old. And it was seen as a fundamental part of her faith to continue to engage in that way. We need to think differently about how we move people through their understanding of what it is to be in this faith community.
Takiyah, I'm just so excited. We haven't met before, and I feel like, whoa! I've heard your name lifted up so much, and I'm like, wow. Yeah, yes, 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 yes. I think we're all just sitting here saying amen. Aisha, were you going to say something?
Well, I wanted to give a shout out to religious education and give a plug for Tapestry of Faith, which is the first time that a free online comprehensive curriculum that was intentionally developed by a diverse group. I was part of it, Jessica York, an African-American woman. And what frustrates me, this is part of our blessing is our curse, is I hear my colleagues, religious educators say, you know, well, I'm writing curriculum. I said, why would you write curriculum? We have a great foundational, theologically sound, comprehensive curriculum. And they're like, well, and I get it. We love being the rebels and the renegades, but I use it, and I'm living the talk. I'm walking the talk at East Shore, kindergarten till 90. We are using Tapestry programs, and I could see the teachers are engaged and they're excited about it, the children and youth, and they're seeing what this is about. And I feel that is one way that we can ground ourselves theologically. And I appreciate that, because I think connecting to each other outside of Sunday morning is important. I want to speak to Takiyah when you said how Muslims and Christians interact with their faith. So we had an election party, which turned out to be probably a funeral and a wake on Tuesday night. But afterwards, the staff had to work on getting Sunday, and we need to do what we needed to do. But folks were very angry at us. They started posting on Facebook, why isn't the church doing more? Why isn't staff doing more? And I said to someone, my Muslim mother would never in a million years say, why isn't the imam doing something for me? She would get her butt to the mosque. Actually, she would just pray right where she is. But she would never look to an imam to give her something when she's in pain. And I don't know if it happened to be white people who were saying that. So I don't know if it's because the immense discomfort of the white folks is something you're not used to living with, and so you want someone to fix it, or it just struck me as, why as a Unitarian Universalist did you not think you could just come to the church and sit in the sanctuary? Like, why was that not an option? So I was thinking that too. Thank you for lifting that up.
Yeah, and on this thing of religious education, something happened here last year that has just stayed with me. So we in a complicated, anyway, this church used to be a Baptist church, and a friend of mine was visiting, and he grew up Baptist, and he's walking through the building with me, and he said, oh yeah, you can tell that this is a Baptist church. The sanctuary is not particularly big, but you have tons and tons of Sunday school classrooms. And for Baptists, this is the big thing, is religious education for children and adults. And so I've just been thinking through this whole thing of how our spaces and everything else reflects something deeper. And one of the questions that I have is, you know, in terms of adult religious education and people not feeling that that's a priority, you know, what is the arrogance that is under that? You know, I'm done.
I have to say, Reverend Joanna, you got me over here like ready to do a shout dance, run around my office. Yeah, because you're right. If we look and think about how space is used and actualized, and how I've shared with other UUs, white UUs in particular, how my own experience of being in this faith has been so deepened by adult RE and small group ministry offerings. That's where I've made my deepest relationships. That's where I've met my closest friends. I love Sunday morning. But it's in those learning opportunities that I've really been the most challenged and pushed, and also where I felt the most tethered in my religious identity and the most challenged to live in the world. And when I've shared that with other people, oh, I've never done anything like that. Why would you go to that? Why would you make time for that? Oh, we can hardly make room for Sunday. And I understand that we all have demands on our time. I certainly have demands on my time. But it's interesting to me, even about what is perceived as a priority in our faith community. The idea that continuing to lean into sort of the foundational ideas that ground our faith and having a sense of that history. One of the things that, and Kenny knows this, when we're together and talking about Blue and organizing, one of the things that I'm particularly passionate about is making sure that Black UUs have a sense of the history of other Black folks in this faith community, and the work. I even bristle at the word contribution. I hate that. What's the Black contribution? You know, it makes it sound like there's some pre-existing scaffold that we came and laid something on top of, or there was already a pot of soup on the stove and the Black folks came in, threw a little salt on top. Like we've been development and growth of this faith, and knowing that has made me feel stronger and more grounded in my identity. But I know that that's not necessarily the same for people who don't know that history. It's also been a real important flashpoint, because I'm not a Unitarian Universalist because I'm running from the faith traditions of my birth. I'm not a Unitarian Universalist because I'm seeking refuge from my mother's faith or my grandmother's faith. I don't have a problem with Jesus. I still read my Quran. I read the Bible. I'm very interested in faith and formation, but Unitarian Universalism is my chosen faith. It's my chosen faith. And I bring all of that with me. Part of the reason why I'm here is because I can bring all of that with me. But if we're not grounding people and giving people a real strong foundation to stand on in terms of their formation and their identity, how do we expect them to live it in the world? And how do we expect our young people, once they bridge out, what do we expect them to do? You wonder why people don't show back up until their late 30s trying to figure out how to be in the congregation, and they don't know because they spent all their time in RE as kids separate from us in the sanctuary, and don't even know what it is to be an adult in this faith community. That's part of the reason why we're in the crisis we're in now, in terms of having people who are inboxing me not knowing what to do. Well, you don't know what to do because you don't know who you are. You don't know who you are as a faith identity because we haven't done the work to make it happen. It's just sad.
Amen, amen, amen.
Yo.
Kenny?
I don't need to talk.
I feel like
I'm here, 6 times? Like, Takiyah, all I really want to add is just that, like, when I listen to you talk about Unitarian Universalism, like that is the faith that I dream about. I mean, and I can't, there's no reason to keep saying anything after that. Like, And making it happen is going to be really hard. But because all of us, we love to get in our own way. But, you know, folks committed to making that a reality, a more consistent thing, like I'm just so excited for that possibility.
And maybe these times will take us there. You know, what I noticed, because I went to a couple different congregations this week, I did notice a lot of people of color visiting, and I hope to hell that they, you know, I said hello to who I could, but I hope it was positive. But I noticed a lot of old people who'd been away coming back, who had say to one of the ministers, I guess I'm a UU when there's Republicans in charge. And I thought, I hope it's a lot deeper than that. I hope it's a lot deeper than that. You know, I will admit that I'm one of those people who can drop spiritual practice until life gets hard. And then I go, oh yeah. And right now we need spiritual practice daily. That was one of the things Reverend Julie Taylor said is, get your support going now and keep it and don't let it up. And so may we find ways, whether through online gatherings that Blue's hosting or in congregations that are bold, to nurture that amazing faith that keeps us all coming back despite endless frustration and disappointment and grief. And yeah, that it's, I'm like, I want what she's having. So we just have a couple more minutes. Is there anything that anyone feels like you haven't said that you'd like to say?
Yeah, just briefly, my closing thought is that, you know, I have talked with a lot of folks who grew up UU and were thinking about, you know, going to church, or and college friends who've seen, you know, Kenny, I see you post about that universal Unitarian thing, and I don't know, it seems pretty great, and I think I might go next Sunday. And I guess that, you know, there's, to use a sports metaphor, there's you know, there's swinging at the pitch and there's watching it go by, and we will swing imperfectly, and that is okay. But my hope is that we take a crack at it, because you know, this can't be just about us and about, you know, filling our pews and all of that. But it's not. It's you know, if someone shows up at your church and they come twice and they don't join, but the message they heard on that Sunday in late November gave them the courage to, you know, reach out and volunteer and become an activist and all of that, that's Unitarian Universalism making a difference. So they may not join your church, but you may give them the strength they need to do exactly what these times are calling for. And so just to feel that that what we're doing is so crucial, and to make it that it's not just about our own gains, but about the world's gains.
Yeah, just to be a part of someone's journey, even if it's just one Sunday, that's important.
Yeah, I definitely want to echo that. I mean, I first went to a UU church when I was in high school. I was sort of ranting and raving about religion one day in the lunchroom, and this young man said, "You should come to the church where my father's a minister." And I said, "What's that?" And he mentioned it. And all I remember thinking was, it's a church with a really long name. Driven past the building several times with my mother, and I remembered that they had a really pretty labyrinth in the back. And so I remember showing up that Sunday. I couldn't have been more than 14 years old, and walking in and feeling like I was at home, and walking in and feeling like that was a place I needed to be. I didn't go back to a UU church for almost a decade, but the experience that I had certainly stayed with me. And I think that's something we need to think about too, beyond what we talk about in terms of having a culture of welcome. It's not just about greeters and welcome and smiles at the door. It's how are we being intentional in our ministry, such that if people only engage us one time, we've given them spiritual food to nourish them much longer than that chance encounter. now is the time for us to be asking those questions.
Amen. Last week, I think that every member of a UU church became part of the welcome committee, and the welcome committee became the pastoral care committee, and we got to see it as that.
Aisha, you got anything you want to say?
I'm just so grateful for this morning. I didn't know what to expect, and it just fed me in such a way. And I know it's not all about me, but I want to thank you for the messages that are just beautiful. Thank you, Takiyah. Thank you, Kenny. Thank you, Joanna. Thank you, Meg. And yes to everything everyone said. Thank you.
Amen. Thank you so much, Kenny and Takiyah. We're going to take next week off. It's Thanksgiving. I want to give a shout out to Lori Stone Sirtosky behind that chalice. This is Lori's last week with us. Terry Bernor is going to be picking up the tech role. And Lori, thank you so much for being here. It's really been an inspiring hour, and I think has a great deal to sustain us all. So thank you very much. See you in 2 weeks.